Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the final program in the Clark Historical Library's Spring 2022 Speaker Series. I'm Carrie Marsh, Director of the Clark, and I'm honored to introduce this evening's speaker, Steve Jessmore. We'd like to begin this evening here in Mount Pleasant, where we are broadcasting from, and throughout Michigan, where many of you are watching from, by recognizing that these locations are part of the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe peoples. In Mount Pleasant, we specifically recognize this as the land of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe. For those joining us today from other locations, we urge you to take the necessary time and learn about the land where you currently find yourself and the indigenous peoples who have lived and continue to live on the lands. To recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory you reside on, and a way of honoring the indigenous peoples who've been living and working on the land from time immemorial. It's important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us to reside on the land and to seek to understand our place within that history. Before moving on to our main event, you need to know that your microphones have been muted and your cameras turned off. If you would like to ask a question, type your question into the chat at any time, and Steve will answer them at the end of the program. You can find the chat box in the lower right corner of the screen. So I'm very pleased to introduce tonight's speaker, Central alum, award-winning photojournalist, and former university photographer Steve Jessmore. Steve's photography career has spanned nearly 50 years. He's a CMU alumnus, as I mentioned, class of 1981, and as a student worked for CM Life. CMU has since awarded him the CMU Journalism Distinguished Alumni Award, given annually to a graduate who has made significant contributions to the field and represented the department with distinction. Throughout his career as a photojournalist, Steve has won numerous international, national, and Michigan photojournalism and photo editing awards, including the Robert F. Kennedy Photojournalism Award for outstanding coverage of the disadvantaged. He is a 5-time Michigan Press Photographer Association Photographer of the Year. And after a career in newspapers such as the Flint Journal and the Saginaw News, he came back to CMU in 2013 to serve as the photographer and photo editor for the university. In 2018, he made the decision to leave CMU to pursue freelance photography and has had several corporate and nonprofit clients since. Most recently, Steve has turned his attention to wildlife photography, which we will hear more about tonight. When he submitted his new work to the 2021 Audubon Photography Award, he swept both prizes awarded in the professional division, winning first prize and honorable mention. This evening, through his photographic images, Steve will talk to us about his career arc as a photojournalist and his new award-winning work. Welcome, Steve, and thank you for speaking to us this evening.
It's great to be here, Carrie. Thanks
Sure.
to you and Brian for having me.
You're welcome, and we're so pleased to have you. So this evening, folks, we're going to change up the format a tiny bit, and we're going to kind of organize this Steve's talk around a question and answer. But please take advantage of the chat box and ask your questions as he talks, and then Steve will circle back and answer some of your questions at the end. Okay, so Steve, I guess let's start us out with the first question. And can you talk to us about how photography came to you and how you thought to turn that into a lifelong career?
Yeah, well, it was something I kind of never intended, quite honestly. In high school, I had thought I'd go pre-med, pre-dental, pre-something, and actually started at CMU to do that. But previous to that, full disclosure, my father owned a camera store. So I was around cameras my whole life. He did a lot of bird photography. but with 16 millimeter film. So I had been around it, but he was in the Everglades in the 60s, and so ever since like my earliest memory, I remember him doing that at least early on. But I got to high school, and I needed a job, just like everybody needs a job as a high schooler. And but I also had loves, and my love was live music, and I really wanted to go see concerts. And I was in Saginaw, and I wanted to go to the Civic Center and see concerts. And my parents told me it was too expensive, and I couldn't go as often as I wanted to. And so I said, well, if I can find a way to go, can I go? And if I can go for free, can I go? And they're like, they kind of laughed, and they said, sure. I said, all right. So I went to the Saginaw News, and I took some pictures I had shot at some concerts and said, as a 16-year-old, I can do this. I can work for you. Um, Here's my parents' number. Here's my dad's store number. Here's my, office number at school. Here's every number imaginable where you can get a hold of me, and I will jump and run and be there that night if you need me. So a few months passed, and I was in art class in high school, and I got a call from the Saginaw News, and they asked me to shoot Parliament and concert at the Saginaw Civic Center. Um, I shot over 100 concerts before I left high school for the Saginaw News, and as a 16 and 17-year-old, and this is Freddie Mercury from Queen. I saw twice, and Kiss, and all these great bands that I just loved in the 70s, and you name it, I got to photograph it. So anyway, so I got the bug and the bite. I loved doing the pictures, but I still went to CMU to do pre-med and pre-dent and pre-something. And I took 18 and 21 credits my first year, and ended up the second semester of my first year, well, the last three credits were photojournalism class. My three roommates were in that same class. I thought, I can sleep in. I'll skip class. I'll just go take the tests and pass it. It's an easy three credits as I do all my calc and chemistry and economics and all the other stuff. So I finally took 4 or 5 tests and aced every one. And the teacher said, Mr. Jessmore, so glad you could be here this today. And I finally realized he knew who I was. And so I started going to class, and I really loved it. And that was kind of that was it for me. That and the concert photography gave me the bug. And so I ended up becoming, a photojournalist. And I graduated in 81, 3.5 years, thought I beat the job rush. There was a huge job rush, and there were no jobs. It was a big recession, and it took me about another 3 years to get full time.
Mhm.
I ended up being a full-time photographer in my hometown of Saginaw, Michigan. And it was a dream career for me. I mean, I had taken a lot of art in high school, a lot of I just liked being creative, and I liked people, and I liked being around people, and I liked being in the front row at all these events, and finding these cool pictures in my community, and being part of the community, and doing good for my community through pictures and making change. And so I ended up staying there for 15 years at Saginaw, and it was great. I documented the Chippewa Indians before they had a casino, before they got their docket money. This was Chief Little Elk. I did, I got to go in the best and the worst, to see the best and the worst of Saginaw. This was one of the worst neighborhoods in Saginaw. Somebody had been murdered in this living room. Just a little bit before that, we were doing a story on the worst neighborhood. But I got to go into places and tell stories, which I really loved, and be creative within the confines of journalism,
Mhm.
within, being creative with truth, telling the real story. And so all my life, I just really loved that, and to be able to get behind the police ropes. This was a murder investigation. They're looking for blood spots, police officers. This was the world champion pipe smoker in Flint. He was like 4 or 5 time world champion. He could whatever keep the bowl lit the longest. But it was fun to meet all these people, just everyday people around me, really, and try to make great pictures out of them. So that career, lasted 15 years in Saginaw, another 9 years in Flint, and another 6 years in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And but I got to share all these people trusted me to share these life moments, and to share them with the world. And I really enjoyed that. One of the favorite things I ever did, and this probably goes into the bird photography, is sports photography. And so 1 week out of four, I would work nights, and routinely every night when I worked nights, I would shoot sports. And I didn't care if it was the local sports, this was Frankenmuth, my little community in town, bad bounce. But I got to shoot everything. I got to shoot the World Series. I got to shoot the Buick Open every year. I think I shot the Buick Open uh, better part of probably 15 to 20 years every time in Flint. And I would lead coverage for the Flint Journal when I was in Flint for the 9 years. I was chief photographer, and I would head coverage with a staff of 10 people to cover the event, which lasted 8 days. But we got again, inside the ropes, and got some privileges. It was a blast, but I really loved moments, and I loved capturing and dynamic situations and kind of making art out of them. This is Chris Bird, who ended up becoming the heavyweight champion of the world. I got to follow him to New Jersey, Evander Holyfield. But here's Chris Bird and Don King at the end of, when Chris won heavyweight champion. Chris was from Flint. But I got the front row seats for a lot of those years in, the seat between the benches at the Red Wings. We covered the Crim race in Flint, which some people may have actually run, but every year for the 10 years I was there, we did a book and covered the race, which was a huge race, thousands of runners. Pistons were the bad boys back then when I was covering Ben Wallace. And, again, having the end front row seat on the end of the court, it was just exciting, and Barry Sanders. And the equipment back then was so different too. This is Barry Sanders with a manual focus lens. I didn't have autofocus or anything like that. So you're trying to photograph with the limitations of what you had. Football game, I might shoot 300-400 pictures at the most, which would be 36 pictures a roll, which would be 10, 12, 14 rolls. But you had to develop all those rolls of film and edit them and print them. And I got to shoot the '84 World Series. I was on the field when Kirk Gibson hit his home run. This was when he hit the home run that won the World Series for the Tigers. I got to go to spring training with the Tigers for Booth newspapers a number of times. And this Cecil Fielder, he was the RBI king for the major leagues 3 times. But I had 5 minutes to shoot this picture, and I had to convince him within that 5 minutes to let me shoot the picture. So it was a challenge. Everything was a challenge in photojournalism. I got to cover the last 7 games at Tiger Stadium, which these are a few of the pictures, but these are a couple of my favorite pictures. Michigan Trumbull, everybody knew Michigan and Trumbull, Tiger Stadium. And this was the aerial shot I shot from a helicopter, one of the last games that ran on virtually every Booth newspaper front page the last game. But I also got to tell stories, which again this was anybody that knows me, community photojournalism is my thing. I stayed in Saginaw, Flint, smaller places because I really like to tell stories within my community and not travel all the time. This is the story that won the Robert F. Kennedy Award for photojournalism. It was a story of a leader dog that I documented for 17 months in between assignments. I didn't have any dedicated time really to do it. But I followed that same leader dog from, the moment he came to an elementary school, they raised him, and, ended up becoming the eyes for a blind man in Kansas City, Missouri. So I documented that for 17 months, and in the end, published 52 pictures, and the newspaper gave me 24 pages to do that, full page, tab pages back in the day. But also, I did a column in Flint, which was probably the highlight of my photojournalism career that I really loved. I did this for 5 years every Sunday. And it started out as my idea. It was brainstorm sense of community. It stemmed from my interview I had in Flint that when I went, they asked me, why in the heck would I ever come to Flint? And, I could go anywhere I wanted. Why would you come to this godforsaken place? Murder, rape, robbery, tops of every list. And this was during my interview. And I said, well, you want to let me be a photographer, but I said, my God, I bet there's like maybe 93% good people here instead of 94. It's all how you look at it. And that was always my philosophy, to find the bright side of things and the positives of things. And so with Flint, I did this column every Sunday, and I let the people talk and tell me why they did what they did for Flint in a grassroots kind of way. It's all on my website if anybody wants to go look at it. But I think 175 columns are on there. And each one tells a story about a positive story of a Flint resident doing grassroots things just to try to make Flint a better place. But that was in a nutshell, or an essence of what I really tried to do as a photojournalist. As you stated, I made a big career change 25 years into Flint, in Saginaw, in Myrtle Beach, really. The newspapers got decimated about 2008, and just staff shortages and cuts all the time with the internet, and we lost all our ad sales, and so I ended up becoming and getting recruited by CMU, and came back to my alma mater to be the staff photographer. Robert Barclay and Peggy Brisbane had been photographers there for a better part of 30 years since I was a student. I knew Robert when I was a student at CM Life. And I took over for the two of them and was the only photographer for CMU for the
Wow.
next 5 years. But it was my job to do what I did in journalism, tell stories, in a positive way, which was really easy to do, and branding with, if you can see here, maroon and gold, trying to find, learn about branding and how to make pictures say CMU without having, type over them or whatever, but just to tell CMU's story and tell the student story and the learning story, and make pictures for brochures, pamphlets, websites. Med school started the first year I got there. That was the first time I had the first white coat ceremony, alternative spring breaks, all the different, the ERP event, Don Uzarski and the Great Lakes Research, to be able to document that in Beaver Island. It was really a natural progression for me to go from photojournalist to really college photographer. College, I really figured I was still a community journalist within a college, but trying to make, I had a lot more license. I was told by my boss, she's like, you're not a journalist anymore. You can still post things. You can fake things. I was like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I mean, I had to at times, but I really like to tell natural stories and find pictures that were happening and cover events and let them unfold in front of me. The powwow was one of my favorite
Mhm.
events. It was a continuation of that from the 80s. Now I had digital in color, and it was just, wonderful to work with. I would go to football games. I still got to, I didn't get to shoot sports, quite honestly. I got to shoot everything around sports, but not sports. So I very rarely got to shoot any action, but I had to tell stories and make pictures um, of the students and the staff and the faculty and the fans, and everything in the band was a huge one. And I had to do it week after week. So I had to try to tell different stories and do the same picture over and over again, different ways. And, so that was a real challenge, and I loved it, and I still love it. And this is what I do to this day. Freelancing is shooting higher ed for numerous colleges now that I've gone freelance in 2018. So I don't know if you have more questions now. That was a
I actually
long-winded.
have one more question. I'd like to kind of circle back to your your photojournalism career. And
Sure.
could you talk a little bit about, it must have been very stressful to go from one kind of high stress, dramatic, you know, um, all the things that photojournalists have to cover on a really busy news day. But could you talk a little bit about slow news day? If you ever had any slow days, and kind of how do you think about presenting work to the paper, to the editors that they would want to publish when there's not a lot of other stuff happening that day?
Yeah, quite honestly, most days were slow. If you think about it, there weren't big news days most of the time in Saginaw or Flint. And, there were the police scanners, and there were some major events during my years. I've had bullets bounce off the streets and guns pulled on me, and, all that sorts of stuff. And you never knew that when that was really going to happen. But most of the time we drove around in cars and just we had radios. In time, we finally had cell phones, but we had radios that the staff would keep in touch with each other. And we knew we always had a page one that we had to fill and a page one on the B section that we always had to fill. And he never wanted to leave those pictures to the night guy. So most of us worked in the daytime and one person would work at night. And if we didn't fill the front pages, the night guy, it would be, he had no choice but to fill the pages. So we would all just drive around and we called it feature hunter or enterprise photography. And we would literally get to know the communities and just try to find things happening. And, I had the picture of the guy fixing the car. I just saw a guy outside fixing the car and he got full into it and the legs in the air. That was the kind of thing you were hoping for, just something that might have had some humor or,
Mhm.
not necessarily newsy, but just still would make people smile or laugh or show what the
Mhm.
community was doing. I mean, whether it was raking or raining or whatever it was, you just wanted to take a fresh take on that every day. So that was a challenge, was to make something unusual out of the familiar. And I thrived on that. I loved it. I mean, I could go into the same situation like the band, the marching band, major, drum major, and just try to think in my head like how I could show that however many different ways I could. And I think a lot of that learning came from, I can remember a bio photography class I had in at CMU back in the day. And that was one of the things we had to pick something and show it 30 different ways, and so that was just challenging as a photographer. I didn't like the fish in the barrel thing, where it was just handed to you in front of you. It was more fun just to have to dig and search and use your contacts in the community and hey, anything going on here today or bounce in and bounce out of someplace. And and if you didn't burn bridges, people trusted you, and I never had any problem being trusted.
Sure. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Um, so so you're going to talk to us about kind of your experience over the past couple of years with COVID. Um, when things started shutting down, like it wasn't just kind of a light bulb went off. Could you talk a little bit about how you went from photographing your community and looking for people and activities to document to then all of a sudden kind of being in isolation and how you made that transition with your photographic work?
Yeah, I freelance again. I quit CMU and got remarried and moved to Grand Rapids. So my wife is very wise and I love her to death, and she's just like so supportive. But she's just like, come over, get married, the work will follow, figure out what you're gonna do, and the money will follow. Just take the dive and let's just do it. And so I did, and I began freelancing in 2018, and have some great friends that were journalists that are now PR people at different universities and things like that. So I made some contacts with my friends, and one of the first one I actually made contact with was in at Grand Rapids Community College, and they're my biggest client. And
Mm,
he told me as I told him, I said, "Hey, I think I'm going to freelance. I think I'm going to do higher ed photography, college photography." And he said, "Steve, if you're going to do that, you can have my work. Just let's just talk." And they've been my biggest client now for 3, 4 years. But so I made that dive, and I had never been a businessman. I had always worked for someone else. I always had a paycheck at the end of the week. I wasn't happening anymore. And it was a real change, to work one day a week, full day, or a day and a half, or and do the rest editing by myself in my office instead of being around a vibrant community like I had at UCOM back in the day, 30 people that I could see and talk to and water cooler talk and all that kind of stuff. So, the first year went really well. In 2019, I had over 100 invoices, which meant, I worked 1 out of 3 days, which is pretty crazy as a freelancer, quite honestly. And 2020 started out doing kind of the same thing. It was really, really busy. And I took a week off early March and this thing called COVID was happening and had no idea what it was. And, everybody was freaking out. And my wife and I went to Washington, D.C. for a break the first week of March. And it's, started being everywhere. And got back. I had an assignment March 8th. I can still remember for Goodwill. And I get my phone just did not stop ringing, and everybody canceled everything I had for the rest of the year in 2020. And everybody here can probably relate to that. We all had our lives altered and we all had our lives changed and we all had to figure out, what we were going to do at that time. And for me, it was like going from 100 invoices to 6 in 2020. That's what I had in 2020. I mean, I thought, okay, well, I got to make good use of this time, and I'm just going to start showing some pictures. But probably in March, my work got canceled, and in about April or May, I started thinking, what am I going to do? And I walked by the window and I saw these birds on my deck, and I thought, I'll just make some pictures, and oh, they're pretty cute, and I'll post them on Facebook. And this is on my deck in the backyard, and my wife laughs at me. I put a blind out on the deck, and I sit in the blind, and I, set up flashes on the deck, and I'm just going all out on these birds, because I didn't have anything else to do. I was trying to watch videos and call other photographers to learn new things. And I like to learn. I like to grow. I like to advance myself. That's, to me, CMU is the dream job, I mean, where I was around that learning all the time.
Mhm.
And so I knew I had to do that, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And after a couple months, I had an assignment for Retailers Magazine, and it was on how hard kayaks were to get during COVID. And I'd never been in a kayak. My best buddy, Adam, he like would always tell me, "Don't get in a kayak. It's the death trap. You're gonna die. It'll roll over. You'll just never survive." And so I thought, well, I'm gonna try it. And so I got in the kayak and I went across, and this is the view I have from our cottage on the Torch River. And so I got in the kayak and I went. Didn't realize, but back there is a river system, a marsh, and I didn't die, and it was really fun. And so I went back and told my wife, I said, I got to get a kayak. And she's like, well, you better get a good one. It's the cameras, make sure it's good. And so I bought this one. It's open top, but I still didn't know what I was going to do. And I was still depressed. And she's like, God put us on this earth for who knows how long. You have to live every day to the fullest, make every day count. This is a gift of time. Don't waste it. Do what you always wanted to do. I'm like, I don't know what I always wanted to do. So I got in the kayak and I would take my cameras out and I started making pictures, and I was having a ball with the pond life. We were isolating up north as soon as governor said we could go up north. So this was in about July, August of 2020. I hadn't even taken any bird pictures yet. And so I started going out earlier and earlier to get better light and better light, which is what photographers are all about.
Mhm.
And the ducks would whiz above my head, and it was dark out and I couldn't stop them. And I thought, this is my this is game on. I have to learn how to do this. As a photojournalist, we always had to bring back a picture. We had to be decent at everything, not great, but decent. You could never walk into some place and come back and say, there was nothing there. I don't have any pictures today, because you had a hole to fill in the newspaper. So that's my philosophy day in and day out. Every time I go, I'm trying to be creative. And I thought, gosh, what if I had to photograph these ducks? I'd never be able to do it. So I have to learn how to do this. So I started doing it. I started photographing birds.
I
And
love
this is a sandhill crane at Kensington Metro Park, but I started watching Facebook and I started posting on Facebook, and I started getting like all these comments from people. I had no intentions other than learning and getting better at something I wasn't very good at. And I would post them and people were like, man, you make me so happy. I've been shut in for this whole
that.
year. I can't go anywhere, and you're bringing outside to me, and thank you. It was just like, thank you over and over again. And then I started getting pictures or notes from photographers, and they're like, Jessmore, you're killing it. You are inspiring me to get out and do something, like I don't know how you're doing this, but and I'm just like, well, I'm just doing what I'm doing and I'm trying to learn. But I spent literally hundreds of hours. I would sit outside and I would spend days, to get one picture. And I would try to figure out where things were because I really don't know birds still. I'm learning. But I know this is a shoveler and I know they have combs in their teeth, kind of like a seine, and they dabble and they strip out nutrients out of the water. They suck it in and then blow it out and they keep the nutrients. And so I learned that. And so I try to tell the little stories and let people know that. And I just kept doing that, and I drove all day this day to Mount Pleasant and back from my house. And I got home and this owl, I was looking for owls all day long, 200 miles. I drive in the driveway, it flies up and lands in the tree right above me. I didn't see one all day long, but here's a barred owl, in my yard. And so, I mean, here's a snowy owl getting attacked by a peregrine falcon. It's it's putting in the time, and I think whatever we decide to do, my wife's, Brenda's, her words were I mean, it was just what I kept in my mind. You just have to use your talents to do something good when you have this gift of time. And who knew if it was going to be 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 months or, none of us knew that. And we were all in the same boat. I mean, we couldn't go in anywhere. You worried about your life going to get groceries. And that was my job since I didn't have any work, to take those chances. But I started taking chances and sitting out and pursuing something that I really never ever thought I'd really like to do. But I began to love it. And I loved how people just loved it. Not that I was getting tons of likes, but it was those messages I was getting, that people would just say how happy it made them feel. And, so I would try to go well beyond, I think early on somebody said, well, you should check out the Audubon. You should check out, this photographer, he made the top 100 in the Audubon. I'm like, well, is that pretty good? They're like, oh, that's great. If you can make top 100, that's really cool. And I said, oh, well, good. And I looked at the photographer and I thought, well, those are good pictures, but quite honestly, it's just a bird sitting there. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It was a beautiful picture of a beautiful bird and gorgeous picture, but it wasn't doing anything. And I just really love to take it that next step and hang out with the birds and, try to get in and be patient. I'll sit in the same spot at times for 6, 7 hours in camo and just let them come to me, whether it's a camo, in a kayak or, under a tree. I have a tree at Torch on the shore, and probably 80% of the pictures you're going to see tonight were taken from under that tree on the shore or in my kayak but virtually every picture from Torch is within, I don't know, 1,000 feet of our cottage or on our property. So all these pictures are just putting in the time and sitting and waiting. I mean, but here's a nuthatch. We all see nuthatches at our feeders. But as I walked through our back property, I looked and I saw him cleaning out. And if you look close, you can see the stuff tucked in the bark of the tree. Well, he was taking the whatever that is, filler, and putting it shaking it out and putting it under there and letting it air out. And then he put it back in and had the nest there all year. So chickadees, we all see chickadees. They even land in our hand at Kensington or wherever. But I hung out for a whole afternoon with a pair of chickadees and just watched them. And again, I want to try to get something I haven't seen before. And that was what we tried to do in photojournalism, capture moments. But this chickadee was doing the same thing, going in and out and hollowing out that hole, coming out with sawdust. He would go in, chip away, come out with the sawdust, and the pair would do that. I actually got within about 10 feet by working my way up through the swamp to these chickadees within probably 4 hours. But, ducks I had never seen. They're here. We just have to look for them. Pintail ducks. They're beautiful, and the formations, red-winged blackbirds. Again, you pause me if you want to ask me a question, but I'm a community journalist my whole life. It's
Hmm.
about photographing my neighbors. And this was really
Hmm.
weird, venturing from people to wildlife, but these are my neighbors and I
Yep.
didn't notice them, you know, and I'm noticing them now and I'm loving it. There's just, I don't care if I saw a post, on Facebook, rosebill, spoonbill. I don't know. I'm not a bird, literally not a bird guy. I have my little bird book to look things up, but there's a rare bird or a stork and it's 2 hours away and it's never here and we should go look for it. And I said, well, go ahead. You know, I would rather stay in my backyard, photograph for 4 or 5 hours, come in for dinner, watch a movie with my wife and have a life and just try to make unusual pictures of these guys. And to me, that, again, this is what I post, but mute swans courting. I followed these two swans all year round. They had babies, and you're going to see pictures of babies, but uh,
Oh,
great
wow.
blue herons building nests. He's bringing that stick back to his mate for her approval to add it to the nest.
Right.
A red-winged blackbird female, feeding, catching a grasshopper to feed. Uh, the fastest birds I've ever tried to photograph, barn swallows are just zip zag, everywhere. Tens of thousands of pictures probably, and that's my favorite, that summer. But I also got this one, which I have never ever seen before. It's kind of like a in-air refueling or something with its baby. And I had never, ever, ever seen that before, and I've never seen it since. But opened its mouth and the baby went in, and it took a couple of fractions of a second and it was gone.
Wow.
But so these are the moments, again, I'm trying to photograph a hummingbird. We've all seen them zip and zag. And my wife has this beautiful garden behind the cottage. And so I sat out for, I think, 2 hours and I got, two visits that lasted probably 30 seconds. This was one of the pictures I got. These are the two swans, five babies, and they carry them on their backs. And I shot this from my kayak. And when I looked up, I was so close to them through my zoom lens. I just kept zooming out and I got hissed at and I had to get out of
Oh,
there quick
I
because
bet.
they're very protective.
Yeah.
But, I mean, again, something I never ever experienced before. So, red-winged blackbirds
Oh,
are
wow.
fierce. They'll attack eagles and anything that comes into their area. And so I've got them pecking at eagle tail feathers and crows are the same way. But again, the circle of life, the babies and the hatchings and the merganser, common merganser babies, going to where they're going to sleep that night, but they all pile out in the back.
Right.
Um, Sandhill crane baby, newborn, I think that was 2 days old. Um, but these are all taken, by the way, with, a 600 millimeter lens, a
Okay.
lens that's about 12 power. So I am nowhere near any of these animals and I'm not encroaching on them or trying to get in close with my cell phone or anything like that. I'm trying to respect their lives that they're living, just like I did as a journalist. And, I don't want to stress about or alter them. We've had numerous snowy owls die around the state the last couple of years with people just, as soon as somebody finds out there's a snowy, they circle them with cell phones and the owls just can't take it, after migration. But I try to keep my eyes open, the rare human that makes a good picture when I'm out. Um, this is one of the babies. After about a month, actually at the end of the first week, there were only two babies left out of the five. The
Oh,
muskies and the turtles and the sandhill crane babies too are real susceptible to being eaten by predators. And but this one baby survived. Um, again, keeping my eyes open like a feature hunter for a newspaper. I saw a mayfly on the water, trying to think ahead, saying, there's a fly on the water. It's early, it's still. I bet a fish is going to come up if I just stay on that. If I focus on that, I bet some fish will jump up and eat it. Well, I was following it and that fish jumped up and it scared the heck out of me because I didn't see it coming and it missed it. And I thought, well, he's coming back. And
Mhm.
I watched and I saw the shadow under the water and hit the motor drive. But I got three pictures in the series of the fish coming out, smallmouth bass grabbing a mayfly. So, I'm trying to come up with a picture that's different, that tells a story that you're not seeing. And I'm doing the same thing again as a journalist would, trying to show you things like who would think that that great blue heron could swallow that whole, and it did. It's as big as its neck, big pike, musky something. Um, But bald eagles are much more prevalent nowadays. It's so wonderful to see so many eagles around, nature coming back, and to be able to show that. This was here in Grand Rapids. Um, this was when I sat under my tree along the Torch River. I have had this mink
Oh,
I have had it close enough to grab with my hand where it looked at me in camo and didn't know what I was. And it would go forward and back and forward and back and just look at me for what seemed like an eternity, but it was more like 3 seconds probably. And but I've had beaver and mink within hand reach of me, just looking at me, trying to figure out what I'm doing.
mhm.
Um, Again, but telling stories, red-winged blackbirds are fierce and territorial, and they set up nests. Loons, which I had never ever
Mm.
seen or heard in my life, and to go out in my kayak and to have them surface within 20 feet of me probably and not be concerned about me because I'm in the kayak. Um, the swans again being territorial and protecting their baby that's left. Um, the still mornings, my routine is I try to be in place a half hour before sunrise. It gets harder and harder as the summer goes on. Already I'm having problems with 7:15, which I shouldn't have, but I am. And so, but I'll paddle out in the dark when I'm up north and sit there in camo and then try to get that first light when the river's still and the birds fly and the light is just golden. Kingfisher, backlit early morning, just as the sunrise, diving in for something. A loon going by, me and when I'm sitting out front. This was an eagle at Shiawassee Flats. Summer sunset, the sun just with the smoke made larger and larger, through the diffraction of the smoke from the wildfires out west. But I shot this at Shiawassee Flats in Saginaw with Eagle. That sun was dropping, noticeably dropping, and he finally turned his head right there where I could see the hooked beak, and then it was gone. Um, but I love capturing, birds in flight coming at me, and ducks are my favorite.
Mm.
So, but again, other things, turtles and mosquitoes and reflections, and trying to make that picture that's unexpected. Like I never ever thought I would see that. And you can see how the water adhesion is, on the mouth of the turtle where it's
Mhm.
come up and the water's still attached, but it was just a still night right at sunset and the mosquitoes were everywhere. And one of my favorite pictures I made, I was sitting there under my tree and looking the other way at the swans, and all of a sudden I caught a flurry out of my eye, like to the right, and there were like 12 turkeys flying at me from across the river. And I had never known a turkey that would fly across water, let alone, I thought they just kind of flew into trees. But
Mhm.
I was able to get a shot of that. Same thing, still mornings, mallard ducks, and the molt. It's
Oh,
something, again, I didn't know. All birds molt once a year at least, and they lose their feathers and they look really raggy for a period of time. Um, but so, this is what I'm trying to do, the interaction within the community, the crow that does not want the eagle to be there. Um, and then the migration, spring and fall, if you're a birder or want to be a birder, this is the time of year to be out because you get the flocks of birds and you get the unusual birds returning north this time of year. And, in October, November, you get the birds coming south through our areas. But where we are, Mount Pleasant, Shiawassee Flats over in Saginaw, the Muskegon, area, um, just all through the Mackinac Straits. A lot of birds pass there. They have raptor watches, Tawas Point, but beautiful time to be out. You see a lot of unusual birds, redhead ducks. Um, this was a bunch of, they're called buffleheads. I'll show you some more buffleheads later, but this was actually a sunrise in the morning. The sun was just breaking through the clouds. Uh, Canada geese, which everybody hates, and I don't like them in the front yard either, but they're everywhere and they're fierce and again territorial, and great blue herons and bald eagles and sandhill cranes. This was the baby swan grown up this winter. They're ready to be kicked out, within a season and go out on their own. Part of the migration, starlings and sandhill cranes. It's one of my favorite pictures. Again, just sitting under a tree and, just looked. I couldn't tell what the two things bobbing in the water were, down just to my left. And I like to have compositions in my mind, like constantly as I shoot. I'm sitting in one place, but I'm looking where the light's hitting and saying, okay, if a bird flies, if they're coming that way, I got to remember that that's there or this is there. And I love these reeds. And I have probably 1,000 pictures of those reeds with different light and different things and different ducks and different geese. But I never ever thought I'd have two deer. I'm going to make a small plug, but this Sunday I'm going to be at Jay's Sporting Goods in Mid-Michigan Community College the Foundation. But I'm the artist of the month, and it's called a Northern Tradition if you Google it. But if you want to come and get a ticket, we're giving away signed prints of this, lithographs of this picture, and that's Sunday night at Jay's. So, but again, one of my favorite pictures. I guess I had him in there twice. But the snow, I love the snow. Again, anything, it's kind of like a weather feature as a journalist. It really adds interest to the picture to me. It adds another dimension, with the ducks and the geese and whatever. These are called shovelers. That's the same one you saw with the seine in the mouth early on. But they get in big circles and swirl, and they're really tight. And it just builds and builds and builds and builds. And this one popped out of the middle. And but they're trying to, I guess they swirl everything together and feed whatever's in the water, kind of like a big cyclone. And but this was truly probably one of my favorite bird pictures this past year. This is one I entered in the Audubon this year.
Wow.
But tundra swans, redhead ducks, flocks are really tough as a photographer because you don't know which one to focus on. It's really hard as they swing by you. You don't know which one to try to grab your focus on, and which will make sense when they get in front of you like this, not knowing if the one in the middle or the one at the top or the one in the front, which one will make the picture still look good. So that's something as a photographer that's hard. My favorite ducks, again, buffleheads. They just are so beautiful. Iridescent heads. They come from the north just for the winter. I just love them. They're so little. They come out when it's dark most of the time. I always said it was kind of like trying to photograph a bullet in the dark. They just zoom by you, and they're so fast and little. But trumpeter swans, Cooper's hawks. This was a barred owl in a sycamore tree. And again, eagles, they're so prevalent now. There's days I'll see 5, 6 eagles, even up at Torch, in different stages. It takes them 5 years to get a white head, and they go from, they build nests out of reeds and sticks and things. And this is a nest building pair down in Grand Rapids. But this is an immature bald eagle. He's probably a couple years old, but still brown, not a lot of white on him yet, no white head. It'll take, again, 5 seasons for him to mate and to get with a white head, something I've learned through this. This is another one in Grand Rapids, one of the nearly mature eagles that's
Mm.
paired up with that other one. This is one I found in the UP that I crept up to in my car, got probably within, I don't know, 20 yards of, and didn't move, and just shot out. The car makes a wonderful blind. I use my car a lot.
Mhm.
Um, uh, uh, Again, the winter time, the wind, the ice, the snow. Swans stick around. They feed, beneath the surface. So I'm not sure if they go hungry or what they do in the winter. But the lake's frozen. There's nothing for them to, get through. They sleep out on the ice like that. These are called snow buntings. That was probably one of my most challenging pictures. I hear from other photographers too. That's real tough to. They fly in just swirls. These flocks are so quick and so fluid. And I shot this over in Muskegon. And but they're winter visitors to the area. They don't stay. But this is spring now. The next pictures I'm going to show you are recent. I've shot these all in the last 3 weeks. And Canada geese trying to be territorial to set up their nest. They try to pick up the best spots in the marsh, and they'll fight fiercely with each other. This is another bufflehead right at sunrise. I love the whole wings down, trying to get
Mm.
2, 3 feathers touching. That's kind of if I had a signature, I would say that's probably my signature. That's what I love to
Mm.
do. I love the translucence too, with the light shining through. In the morning, I usually shoot into the sun, and at night, I usually shoot with the sun over my shoulder to give me different looks so that I
Interesting.
never have the same, that at least I have different chances every day with when I have sunshine. This is called a hooded merganser, tiny, tiny little duck, but gorgeous little guy. And they're, for the most part, winter visitors too. But this is a hooded merganser after he was successful. They're diving ducks. He caught a crayfish and they swallow them whole, but not quite whole. They shake off the claws first. And I was lucky enough to have him do it in front of me, and literally shook off the crayfish claw, and then he shook off the other one and then swallowed the body whole. But that's what they eat. And then this is a bufflehead and the same thing, but that's a lamprey larva, and which is a good thing,
Thanks.
people tell me. But you see their iridescent head, which is really hard to see unless it's sunshiny. And I've had very few opportunities. It seems like it's cloudy so much of the time.
Mhm.
But again, the gaze, the
Mhm.
intensity. And this I shot in my yard just the other night. But up at the top of the tree, this starling was trying to get at a red-bellied woodpecker, and they fought off. He fought off the starling. She did, I guess. And but birds are vicious, just like any other. Some people, some predators. They all uh, 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 are looking for different things. And this was the last great favorite picture of mine. I shot this about a couple of weeks ago under my dock, where I sat out and I saw these coming in between the ice, and they were looking for open water to feed. And I noticed the shaft of light. And as a journalist, again, you're trying to visualize what's going to happen next so you can capture it. And I saw the streak of light, and I thought, oh my God, if he just paused, or I can motor drive it and catch it. And if he didn't, move through the dock, and 2, 3, 4 shafts later, he paused, and I got 4 or 5 shots with the eye. And but again, that just one of my, I think, favorite pictures. I can't imagine having much more of a favorite. Just a normal, everyday neighbor that is an unusual picture. So that's what I have from that. I've gone way too long, I know. Um, but do you want me to just go into this, the last thing before
I do.
questions?
My question was going to be, can you talk a little bit about the process of entering the Audubon, and also can we see the photos that won?
Yep. Well, here we go. So the process is trying to make a picture first. And quite honestly, it's editing and trying to figure out what you have and trying to figure out what's unusual. And last year I entered for the first time. People told me I should enter, so I did. I entered 4 pictures. That's all I entered. And I entered the last week where you could enter. I wasn't going to do it. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to take a morning and enter. So it's a pretty lengthy process, actually. There's a whole page you got to fill out, a whole big form about the bird and what it was doing and where you captured it and what the bird is and is it a male or a female and what technical information you used and all of that information. But this is this was a red-tailed hawk down in Kensington Metro Park, way in the back of the park. And I was hiking with a guy I met on Facebook, and I just really hadn't shot hardly any bird pictures yet. And I had a new camera and a new lens. It was a zoom lens, and I shot both of my Audubon winning pictures with a 200 to 600 zoom lens and a Sony A9 II camera, if anybody cares. And so not the highest end, not the really expensive big lenses, pretty much an over-the-counter zoom lens, not even a professional per se zoom lens. But I thought it would be a good chance for me I did a lot of research. That's what I found was a good combination for a lot of people. Sigma makes a great one. Canon makes a great one. Nikon makes a great one. Sony makes a great one. So I locked onto Sony cameras. That was my first Sony camera. And I followed this hawk. We saw him, and so we circled him around with 600 millimeter lens. Shot him for probably 30 minutes from every angle at a distance. And my buddy said, "Hey, I'm going to take off. I got enough pictures." And I said, "Really? Like you're going to leave, And there's that old adage, and it's so cliche to even say it, but a bird in the hand, two in the bush sort of thing. It's so true. If you have something in front of you, I don't care what it is. I'm just going to watch it, as long as it has potential of doing something. So I said, well, I'm going to stay and watch it. I don't have any pictures of this guy, and it seems tolerant of me, so I'm going to stay. It's not flying away. So I watched it for 2.5 hours. And it finally fanned out at the end of about 2 hours. I stayed at a distance. It's cold out, by the way. It was very dark. It was late in the afternoon on a January day in wintertime, dark, cloudy, no sunshine. But so I just hung with this hawk and it finally took off after a couple hours. And I got this picture. And I thought, it's okay, but I didn't know where it was. And another guy had stopped and we were both kind of watching it. And I said, well, I'm going to go follow it. Do you want to follow it too? And let's just see where it went. He's like, okay. So we walked about 100 yards, 150 yards towards the direction where it went and got there. And it was on the ground, jumping up and down with these leaves, spewing them kind of, and looking. It would jump and look and jump and look and jump and look. Obviously, whatever it was after, he missed. And so it flew up in the tree and sat there looked down at the spot. And he ended up just watching that spot for about another 20 minutes or so. And all of a sudden there was a squeal and it was a chipmunk and it ran and the hawk dove and landed on top of him. And I was about 40 yards away probably. And it wasn't facing me. It was going away from me. And then it turned around and it flew straight at my head, came right at me, and I had a duck. It was dangling the chipmunk. And it flew up and it was in a tree that was leaning across the canopy that had fallen. So it was laying like this up in the air. And it landed on top of the tree with the chipmunk. It looks like I'm laying on the ground, but it was actually shooting almost straight up into the air. And this was where my spot news training came in because I never stopped shooting at any of it. I totally missed them coming at my face. Didn't know what I was doing with a new camera. But I just kept shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting and didn't pay much attention. The guy behind me yelled at me. He goes, "Hey, you should come back here. It's a lot better." And okay. And I went back and looked and I thought, no, it's not. And by that time it was done and the chipmunk was gone and it was dinner and the hawk flew away. But I had this picture and quite honestly, this is a picture that won honorable mention in the professional category of the Audubon contest. So, they only gave out one first and one honorable mention and no other awards in the category. And then they did a top 100 beyond that. But this picture is the one that was up for first with the other one that won. So they were going back and forth over these two pictures. But in all seriousness, I think this is probably I don't find it gruesome personally. I know it happened. They have to eat. It's circle of life. The pictures after this were gruesome. This one wasn't. I probably shot over 2,000 pictures that day. I got to this image and I stopped. I just literally stopped. I didn't go any further. I said, it's perfect. You know, the eye to eye and the little pleating and just the angle and everything. So anyway, in all seriousness, this is probably the favorite picture I've ever shot in my life. It's just, you know, to me, it was really where I had taken good bird pictures before that, but the storytelling I really thought was the best out of this. The cardinal, I shot out of my car window. I had this 200, 600 zoom. I was driving rural roads looking for hawks and eagles, and I couldn't find any, and I was kind of bummed out. It was really, really cold. I saw a hawk in the distance. I was pulling down a rural road. I saw the hawk up in the air on top of a tree, and I pulled my car over the side of the road, leaned out the window. The hawk went ahead of me and sailed off into the distance. I got the tail end, and I didn't get anything. I looked over to my right. Here's this cardinal on top of weeds, these little weeds that were protruding out of the snow, eating the seeds. And I thought, it's a cardinal, you know, okay. You know, I want a hawk. I want an eagle. I was really into that mode at that point. And so I watched it for a while and I saw it was, you know, on the different weeds and it would fly from one to the other and zigzag. And so I turned off my car and I rolled down all my windows. And I learned really early that if you leave the heat on in the wintertime, you get heat waves in the picture and it affects your sharpness. And so I had my sunroof open, my windows open. It's like, you know, seriously 0 degrees out. It's wintertime. It was bright and sunny, which was rare. And so I leaned out from my driver's side out the passenger window with that lens and just watched it and shot a few pictures. I saw it on this weed to the right. And I thought, well, it's going to go from this weed to that weed. There's no doubt because of the research I did. And I bet as soon as it takes off, I'll just start shooting. And so I did. And this was the first frame I shot and ended up cropping it like this for in the end. I thought it was much stronger, just the form and the art of it like this. And again, the three feathers skimming the ice and the snow. And if you look close, you can see snow crystals flying and the catch light in the eye and the little chin feathers and the hair in the wind, you know, all the feathers in the wind, you know, but that was, and it'll bring everybody, probably all my editing friends out there, it'll bring them joy because I totally went over it when I edited it. I was looking for hawks and eagles and I was so bummed. Went through all my film or my pictures, didn't see it. I saw the cardinal. I thought, oh, it's okay. You know, I didn't even really look at it. And about 2 days later, I went back and I edited out that picture and I posted it. And I thought, well, it is what it is. It just went viral, and it really shocked me, quite honestly. And then, you know, the whole story about cardinals and being a loved one coming back, and it just took on a life of its own. And so, you know, by entering that in the Audubon, I got calls, and I didn't know that I won, but I got a call from the photo editor and from the National Audubon photo editor, and she told me that was, you know, probably the best. She's seen every thousands of cardinal pictures, but never one as good as that one. And I still, you know, I mean, I'm kind of overwhelmed with the whole thing. But you know, I love the picture, and I love how people have loved it. And you know, again, it's taken me places where I never dreamed that this would ever take me because I really thought I had my reward with everybody just being happy with the pictures I was posting, and now it's really given me a jolt of energy, I guess, you know,
Sure.
in
We
some
have
direction.
Steve, a question has come in about the cardinal picture. The questioner wants to know, can you talk a little bit about the technical specifications of this shot? Because it really does seem like it's like a stuffed bird that's just been suspended, right? It's just, as you said,
Right.
it hits all the notes, right?
Yeah, it really does. You know, just the graphic nature. The wing is perfect, like, you know, along the ground into that point and perfectly flexed. And, you know, again, the catch light with animals, with people, if you can get that catch light where you see the light in the eye, it gives it the depth. Technically, it was a 5,000th of a second, which is a very high shutter speed. And what I've
Right.
learned, one of the biggest lessons I've learned is, um, small birds, higher shutter speed. Big birds, you can get away with not so high a shutter speed. The wings don't move as fast, but you get a hummingbird or if you're trying to get them flying.
Sure.
But like Canada geese are so much easier to shoot than little birds like cardinals or whatever because the wings aren't flapping at the frequencies. So, really,
They're just a
I try to
slower
shoot at
animal.
2,500th of a second is my goal in the sunshine, a minimum.
Okay.
And then I try to go higher and higher as if I know if I have a little bird coming at me, I try to switch on the fly. The one thing I love about my cameras is all the buttons are programmable. It's very intuitive. I never take my eye out of the viewfinder. I know where everything is. I can change my ISO. I can change my shutter speeds, my apertures, my whatever I want to change. I can do it on the fly without looking out of the viewfinder. And I've learned my new camera will do 30 frames a second. I never shoot at 30 frames a second ever. But I've learned that if I do shoot at 30 frames a second, I'm going to be editing for like 30 hours because I have so many pictures. So I've learned that I've become better and better at capturing them. So I wait till they get closer to me, quite honestly, and then I don't shoot as many pictures because you learn like anything. No matter what
Sure.
you do, you learn by looking at what you did and evaluating what you did and moving forward. So what I learned from this, it really taught me a lot of lessons, the high shutter speed, the shallow depth of field where the weeds in the background are out of focus, the bright sunlight, how much detail it gives me versus cloudy days. One of my favorite things about this picture, if you look close at the snow beneath the cardinal, is the red, the light coming, the reflected
Yeah.
red onto the snow.
Mm-hmm.
And I love just the detail, the chin feathers and the head feathers. But so that all comes with those high shutter speeds and those
Okay.
freezing everything.
Sure. So you mentioned that you cropped this photo. Do you do just in your bird photography, but in wildlife photography, but also in especially lately, what kind of do you do any other kind of post-production work on your images?
I used Photoshop and Lightroom, but
Okay.
like I still try to use journalism ethics, where if the weed was to quite honestly in focus and I don't know, right in front of his face, I wouldn't take it out. That's the way it is. So I'm pretty pure with just making images the way they are, although I don't consider the format sacred, if that makes sense. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have to be 2:3 in the end ratio. It doesn't have to be full frame. I'm not a purist like that, but I try to be pure ethically. Like I don't bait birds. I wouldn't leave a mouse out to lure in an owl. I wouldn't. I don't like to go to I see a lot of people post pictures, and it's a close up of an owl or an eagle or whatever, and it's at a nature center or a rehab center, and they don't say that. And, they'll post or publish things, and you don't know whether it's wild or tame or whatever.
Mm.
I like to really, really try to capture them in the wild. It's just a challenge to me. And again, it's just like journalism. We'd get fired if I ever faked something. I'd fire myself if I ever faked something. Honestly, I couldn't live with myself if I did that. So I
Mm-hmm.
try to live by those standards.
You mentioned that you often wear camo when you're photographing in kind of out in birds or whatever. Um, do the so that's a way to kind of have you not be present for the animal, right? For the bird. But do the
Right.
birds ever know that you're there? Um,
I,
I mean,
yeah, I
obviously
think,
your cars can be like a blind, but
right.
is it just the
Yeah,
stillness?
I think they do realize to a point you're there. I
Yeah.
think you're a lot less. The human form I've found is very threatening to wildlife. Just the actual form, a person standing up, they just do not like it. I'll have birds veer, be coming and veer way out of the way to come not near me standing up. But again, if I'm seated in a kayak with camo on, or even without camo, most of the time, if I'm just, my secret, I think, is staying patient and still. I
Mm,
just like to sit still and let them be birds and wildlife be wildlife and not influence them. And the camo, the first day I wore camo, I noticed a marked difference though with how they approached me. I've actually had mute swans attack me in not knowing what I was and come straight at me and starting to put their wings up where I had to get the paddle out and splash them because I had full camo on. I've had, like the mink. He never sees me till he gets within 5, 6 feet of me. And then he's just looking at me like, what are you? Because he with the camo.
mhm.
And if we're out on the porch, he won't show himself. But if I'm like that, he'll come right up to me. So I know it makes a difference. In all seriousness, I never was a hunter. I never felt like I was legit wearing camo. Like I always wanted to wear it, but I couldn't. So, it seems stupid, but I like it. It just makes you blend in. And now I have so much camo. I have probably, like closets full of
Wow.
camo and college shirts are my, like I just pick out one or the other depending what I'm doing that day. But
Yeah.
yeah, it really makes a difference. And I would suggest to anybody to think about doing that. And what I've learned is there's different kinds of camo for different kinds of things. Fall camo, spring camo, water camo, um, sky camo, whatever. If you're over a ridge, under a ridge, in the snow. I wore snow white camo this winter and it worked wonders. But I think the biggest thing is sitting still. It seems really stupid. Don't be on your cell phone. Don't be having the light hit your face. I mean, don't do anything that'll reflect or shine or, one of my biggest, that's one of my no-nos. Don't look at your cell phone when you're out there. The other no-no is, we call it chimping when you look at your pictures as you shoot. And every time I do that, I miss something. And it's like I'll be looking to see if I got something, but then I'll be like this and I'll look and something flies right by me or whatever. And so those are the two things, the biggest things that really to me are easy to not do, you know.
Steve, do you ever get discouraged?
No, honestly, I don't. It's early on I learned in journalism that I really wanted to learn. I've always wanted to learn. I've always wanted to get better. I just, it's just what you do with, I was the way I was taught. I don't know, it's our grading system in school. It's whatever it is, I just would like to self-improve. And I can still remember in journalism, one of the first times I took a picture out to the desk to publish in the paper and the editor's like, "Oh my God, this is amazing. This is great." I'm like, "Really? Why? Like, why is this so good?" And he goes, "Well, it's a vertical and I got a vertical hole." And I'm like, "Oh my God, that's all he cared about was the shape." And it wasn't a horizontal, so it was good. And so I got thinking at that point, my process, everybody has a process. My process is I shoot. If I do something wrong, I talk to myself. I'm like, Jessmore, what are you doing? Why didn't you get there earlier? Why were you looking at your phone? Why weren't you paying attention? Why, did you shoot at that shutter speed? Whatever. I'm questioning myself to make myself answer and to make myself learn and to say, you got to come out of this better every time. And if I miss something to me, it's just like, with wildlife, I'm learning their habits, I'm learning their whatever. I get frustrated, I get, upset, but I know they'll be back. Odds are they'll be back, and I can be smarter the next time, or get there a little earlier, or have a different lens, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. But I think that the process is so important to self-critique because I never had anybody do that for me. So it's to shoot the same day you shoot, to edit, look at what you shot, say why is that blurry? Why is that whatever? Why did I miss that? Analyze it, store it away, move on, go out, clean slate that night with a little bit more information. If it happens again, hopefully you get it. If you don't, you learn why. The same thing. So honestly, I don't get discouraged. I just see it as an opportunity and, you know.
Yep. Last question, Steve, of the evening. Can you talk a little bit about your transition in your photography from film to digital?
Yeah, it was all my life. It was constant, It was I started out in, you know, college, not even doing color film, just black and white negative film, and having to do that, and then, learning color film and learning color, and then learning color slide film, and then, you know, going from color slide film, we had to go to uh, using film, but scanning it into the system. And then we got really low quality digital cameras, and then we got better quality digital cameras, and now we have digital cameras that are unbelievable. And I'm glad I learned on film. Like I think I told somebody earlier that, I'd shoot a football game and I'd shoot 300 pictures or 360 pictures, which might be 10 rolls of film. You know, it seems like a lot. I bet you I shoot in the morning 2,500 pictures now, like if I'm out shooting birds. And, just that transition now, at least knowing from the film days of being so critical with editing and, where I had 360 and being able to pick out the best out of the 360 deliberate pictures versus 2,500 all over the place pictures. It's the whole editing for me is key. And to me, digital is it's a blessing and a curse. You shoot so many more images, you have so many more to cull through and to look at. Um, and you have so many more that are pretty good because the technology is so much better than it
Mhm.
used to be in film. So, again, everybody's a photographer now, honestly. I hear that all the time from clients and, oh, we can do our pictures with a cell phone or whatever. This is a digital camera, the cell phone. So I think what I see the biggest personal thing, like mistake that I see um, and that I try not to do. And this is to each his own. But for me, I don't want to post too much. I don't want to show people too much. I don't want you to get bored with my work. I don't want you to see my worst and or my average. How about that? I think a portfolio, we always would say in photojournalism, is as strong as your weakest picture. I see that as my posts or my Instagram or my, whatever I do. I want you to see the best of the best. And
Mm.
so I might shoot 2,500 and I might do that for 6 days and only show you one picture out of the 10,000. But I hope it's pretty good. And I hope it's different and it's not a mallard every day or it's not a, you know what I mean? It's got some variety and diversity.
Mhm.
And someday I need to get back and look at all those other 10,000 pictures critically, which is tops on my list because I know I have a lot of gems in there. I have five 8 terabyte hard drives that I've shot filled with images from when I started birding.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Wow.
I can't get on top of it. Hundreds of thousands of photos and because I'd rather make new pictures than sit and edit. So I mean, someday that was my winter project and I didn't do it. So someday I got to get through that and do that, make it a priority. And I'm trying, but something always gets in the way, like spring migration or something.
Sure. Well, thank you, Steve, so much. Before everyone signs off, I just want to let everyone know that the CMU libraries are hosting an exhibition of Steve's wildlife photography. The show opens on May 20th. It will run through early August, maybe the second week in August. The title of the exhibition is Birds Doing Stuff. There might be a subtitle, but we don't quite know what that is yet. So I want to encourage all of you, come to Mount Pleasant, come to the library after May 20th to come to see a really lovely show of Steve's wildlife photography. I'm really looking forward to that show, by the way. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you so much for your presentation, for showing us your beautiful photography. And I hope you stay curious. I hope you stay creative. Keep taking thousands of photos of birds and other wildlife and share them with us. Um, they're just really lovely, and we really appreciate your time with us tonight.
Well, thank you. And the last thing I would just say, if anybody hasn't, I do have on Instagram where I try to post 2, 3 times a week with birds, and it's just at @sjessmo. So no RE, but SJESSMO. And if you want to friend me on Facebook, I'll friend you too. And I try to post there frequently, but I do try to post new content there if anybody'd like to see it. And do have a website you can go to, just stevejessmore.com, to look at stuff too. Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you to all who are here. We really appreciate your attendance.
Yeah, thank you.